Happy Monday, DawgNation. My name is Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs. Let me fix my hair a little bit. That was a little bit of a mess. Sorry about that, folks. But good to have you with us for the program today. We're presented by Pella Window and Door of Georgia. We'll obviously talk about the Arik Gilbert news that dropped yesterday. We'll react to that. John Stinchcomb coming up a little bit later on as well. Very busy show. What do you say we just rock and roll and get it going? DawgNation Daily, daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented by Pella Window and Door of Georgia, begins right now.
Today's episode of DawgNation Daily is brought to you by Pella Window and Door of Georgia, viewed to be the best.
Presented by DawgNation.com. This is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. Here's your host, Brandon Adams.
So I started Friday's show addressing hypocrisy that I was going to put on display in relationship to Gunnar Stockton, the five-star quarterback committing to Georgia for the class of 2022. Some of the things I'd said about that in the past. One of the things that we are proud of around here is that when there is a hypocrisy, when there is something I'm going to say that's contradicted maybe something I've said before, I try to own that. I try to take that head on. I try not to run from that. I'm proud of that fact. I'm also proud of this, the fact that we don't have to do that very much. For the most part, I feel like anyway, I try to anyway, maintain a level of consistency through good times and bad on various opinions. What I'm referencing here is former five-star tight end from the class of 2020, Arik Gilbert, has announced his intentions to transfer from LSU to Florida. This is obviously, I would say, bad news for me in a couple of fronts. I wanted Gilbert at Georgia. I don't want anybody who I view as a good player to be at Florida. In fact, let me show you this on Twitter here. This is Gilbert kind of making this known there yesterday. He says, after careful consideration, I have decided to commit to the University of Florida. This is the best situation for me, and I'm excited to join the family, he says. And speaking of family, down there at the bottom, and I didn't even know tweets could do this. I don't think any of my tweets have ever done this. Maybe I just don't have like those kind of location things turned on. I probably don't want Big Brother knowing where I am all the time. But it says he's at Family Dollar when he does this. Now, I got to say something here for a moment. I grew up going to Family Dollar a lot. A lot of you, rich folks with silver spoons in your mouth you never seen the inside of a Family Dollar. I used to go to Family Dollar all the time. I feel to a degree a sense of betrayal from Family Dollar. Like when I was a kid, like late 80s, like Family Dollar was a great place to get a bunch of baseball cards, things like that. They'd have these big, cardboard, almost like it's almost like a big crate, full of this stuff of like someone like the 89 Donruss, rack packs and things like that. You kind of dig through there, try to find star players in the front of those things. I used to love going to Family Dollar, but all of a sudden Family Dollar becomes the grounds on which the place, the epicenter for Arik Gilbert, a player that I've liked and touted for his pledge to Florida. I think the Family Dollar and I may be on hard times here just for a little bit. And to kind of take this a step further, a lot of you know this. The thing in life I'm probably the most morally opposed to more than anything else is free advertising. I just don't want to do that on the sacred space that is DawgNation Daily, presented by Pella Window and Door of Georgia. I don't want to give away anything for free today, but I'm so upset with Family Dollar for the role that they've played, at least seemingly, in the pledge of Arik Gilbert here. I'm actually going to give some free advertising away to what I'm assuming is probably their number one competitor. Can we give a shout out to Dollar General right quick? There you go. I'm going to give a shout out here to Dollar General. I'm assuming their website's probably dollargeneral.com. Georgia fans, go show some love to Dollar General there, just as a way of, maybe a little bit of revenge when it comes to Arik Gilbert and the Family Dollar pledge, the commitment that took place there. So, yeah, there's a little love for Dollar General. We'll give a little free advertising to what I'm assuming must be a big competitor to Family Dollar. Now, on a more serious note, I know what a lot of you are going to say back to this. BA, Georgia doesn't need Arik Gilbert anyway. And that's probably true. I thought Connor Riley had a really good piece this morning at DawgNation.com kind of talking about that very point, that Georgia's got plenty of tight end depth, in addition to Darnell Washington, who we've seen on the field this year, who looks spectacular, the other tight ends in the program. You've got a guy coming in like Brock Bowers, who I think also brings a lot to the table as well. This is not a matter of Georgia necessarily needing Arik Gilbert as much as it is kind of the zero-sum game of the SEC. I said the other day, when Gunnar Stockton committed to Georgia, that for me, this was just as big for what Georgia was getting as it was for what Georgia was preventing Auburn from getting. That's the nature of kind of the zero-sum business here. What's good for you can also be bad for one of your rivals. And Georgia, had it gotten Arik Gilbert, would have prevented Arik Gilbert from being someone who plays against Georgia in future years. So I kind of agree with Georgia fans who say it's more of a want than a need. I'm totally with you there on that. And a lot of you know I'm just a fan of Gilbert's. I think he has a chance to be a really interesting player, and I'm not going to run away from that just because he's chosen Florida here. Him being in Gainesville playing for the Gators instead of being in Athens, I would say it's probably an example of Georgia taking a little bit of a loss. But ultimately, what's more important to me than anything else is this. There's been a lot written about this, especially on Twitter, over the course of the last 24 hours or so. The fact that all of a sudden now this really becomes a pretty significant part of Florida's branding there now. That Florida has all of a sudden found a ability to kind of get in there and get these former elite recruits out of the transfer portal, sort of a second chance you, not last chance you quite. Florida's kind of becoming second chance you with some of these guys. Obviously, you think about Brenton Cox. You think about, Bowman from Clemson, the running back. Now, Arik Gilbert, I saw where Florida, which ranked number 9 for the class of 2020 when it first kind of came together. Well, all of a sudden you had Bowman from Clemson. You had, Gilbert from LSU. All of a sudden that number 9 ranking apparently kind of moves up down to number 6. That's how effective Florida's been in the transfer portal. And I do kind of have my eye on that a little bit because Georgia has been so close to really knocking Dan Mullen out of the game. I mean, if you really go check out Florida message boards, I'm sure they're happy today with the Arik Gilbert news. But overall, Florida fans, I would say, by and large, don't walk around with like this great sense of satisfaction with the program. They're frustrated with Todd Grantham. They are frustrated with the way this program has recruited high school players. There's a little bit of frustration. And yet, when Georgia lost to Florida this past season, all of a sudden it opened the door for Florida to kind of establish something that can be permanent, to establish something that can last for a while. So I think all of this for me kind of leads me to say this, that the presence of Gilbert at Florida, whether he plays in this year's game or not, because, by the way, you still got to navigate all of that when it comes to the SEC transfer rule and kind of everything that goes along with that. But the presence of Gilbert at Florida just really reminds you of just how important this Georgia-Florida game is going to be on the field for the Dogs here this year. Not simply because they want to get revenge for the game they lost a year ago, but because it's always important to upend whatever momentum might be starting to establish for any of your rivals. That's why the long winning streak that Georgia's enjoyed against Tennessee has mattered and has helped Georgia kind of keep Tennessee at bay. Same thing for Auburn. Winning those games year after year after year kind of keeps Auburn from becoming much of a nemesis for UGA. But when Georgia slips up and loses to Florida in Jacksonville this past season, all of a sudden it opens the door for Florida to find itself a little bit of a footing, to find itself, a little bit of a brand that can help attract talent to the program. And right now, Florida does, for whatever reason, look like a pretty attractive destination for transfers. So when Georgia gets a chance to play Florida this upcoming season, I think maybe Georgia on the field can remind all prospective players in the SEC, whether they be high school recruits or prospective transfers, exactly what Florida is all about, a program that is measurably inferior to UGA. Georgia missed its chance to prove that, last November, but coming up this October may have a chance to do just that. Now, let me shift gears kind of on a similar subject and address something that was said on our program on Friday, because what's interesting about Gilbert choosing Florida and Florida's pursuit of Gilbert to do this, and, guys like Tim Brewster and people like that have been talking about this on social media for a while. They weren't making this much of a secret, that apparently that may open the door for Georgia to actually have a little bit of a better in when it comes to 4-star defensive back Terrion Arnold. He'll make his choice on Wednesday. He's let it be known that's coming at 4 p.m. on Wednesday. Of course, DawgNation will have plenty of coverage of that. But as a kind of a foreshadowing for what might happen on Wednesday, certainly no guarantee that Georgia gets Arnold when the choice gets made, but as a foreshadowing of all this, Jeff Sentell told us on Friday that Florida may be more preoccupied with others to really focus and spend too much time on Terrion Arnold. Kind of interesting what Jeff said about that going back to the end of last week, given what we now know with Arik Gilbert being in the fold there for the Gators. Let me let you hear Jeff on Terrion Arnold.
I think it's between Georgia and Alabama. I don't think Florida's in this race. I don't think Florida sees how good Terrion Arnold is. I think Florida thinks that they've got enough at defensive back and safety. They've got enough there with the pieces they already have signed or on campus, and they want to use their remaining scholarships for transfers and portal guys and graduate transfers.
So isn't that interesting that from Jeff's perspective, and he reported this on Friday before the Gilbert news became official yesterday, from Jeff's perspective, Florida's so busy right now chasing down these transfers. Obviously, Arik Gilbert, a name that comes to mind there because, they want him to kind of follow in the footsteps of Kyle Pitts. They're so busy doing that right now. Apparently, according to Jeff, they don't have a lot of time, energy, resources to devote to the recruitment of Terrion Arnold, someone who Jeff Sintel has told us many times, and Jeff Sintel, by way of repeating what Arnold said, Kirby Smart said to him, has a chance to be a real impact defensive back from the word go here at UGA. So pretty interesting battle lines being drawn here. Florida saying we're going to focus more on a transfer portal guy, and we're going to kind of leave the Terrion Arnold recruitment to other people to do. Georgia, obviously, I would say, certainly recruiting Gilbert hard, but focusing in on Terrion Arnold here, there as well. So it could be that if Arnold ends up choosing Georgia, and that's a big if, given the fact that Alabama still looms large in this recruitment, and Gilbert's there at Florida, following these two players on different sides of the ball in far different position groups to see who really, maximizes their opportunity the most at the various schools could be an interesting thing to do. Overall, bottom line is this. Georgia loses this battle, but will live to fight another day. Terrion Arnold is an example of that coming up on Wednesday. Florida gets a tight end. You almost wonder for Gilbert, from his standpoint, is this just another example of kind of chasing what last year's big trend was? Going to LSU the year after Joe Brady and Joe Burrow had great success. Going to Florida the year after Kyle Trask and Kyle Pitts had great success. You kind of worry about that for him, but you can't, make his decisions for him. You got to let him live his own life, and he has done that. These two teams that already had a lot of backstory with each other, this just adds to that rivalry, and we've all got October 30th circled. Can't wait to see Dogs and Gators on the field, Georgia getting its chance at revenge. My name's Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented today by Pella Window and Door of Georgia. Good to have you with us, no matter how you get to us today, live on video, 10 a.m., Facebook, YouTube, Twitter. We're on the radio at noon on Athens Sports Radio 960 The Rev, and we are available as a podcast wherever you find them, including the world-famous DawgNation.com. Just really appreciate you being here. John Stinchcomb coming up with us today. Before that, let me give a big thank you to my friends at Pella Window and Door of Georgia for making all of this possible. Pella does a great job of that. Energy-efficient windows and doors. As I'm driving in today, there was the faintest little hint of maybe some snow flurries, just a little bit of, dusty drizzle kind of coming out of the sky. But it reminds you that it is cold outside, and when it's cold outside, you want it to be warm on the inside. And the way to make sure it stays warm on the inside of your house is to keep that energy in the house where it belongs. That means energy-efficient windows and doors can certainly help you do that, and Pella Window and Door of Georgia can provide those to you. Nationally known company, that means unparalleled resources. Family-owned branch right here in Georgia, that means really dependable, dedicated service. Also a great deal for you here as well. Between now and February 18th, so a couple more weeks to take advantage of this, you can get $150 off windows, $350 off doors, or 0% APR for 36 months. Of course, the website, PellaBranch.com. That's PellaBranch.com. But let me remind you again, we've got a new phone number we've been telling you about when it comes to Pella Window and Door of Georgia. So I want to make sure you make note of this, 678-638-1496. That's 678-638-1496. Tell them you heard about them right here with me, BA, here on DawgNation Daily, presented by Pella Window and Door of Georgia. And I promise you, they'll take good care of you after that. We're going to get John Stinchcomb here coming up in a moment. Before that, though, let's squeeze in a quick Around the Doghouse here. I want to kind of keep the conversation going about UGA recruiting, because I thought there was something really interesting that showed up at DawgNation.com over the weekend, and I think this is going to be a little bit of a foreshadowing for kind of the stuff that you're going to hear a lot in the days to come. When Jeff, once again, was with us on Friday's show, he talked about Kojo Antwi, the wide receiver, a good-looking player at Lambert High School, battling Georgia with Ohio State for that great wide receiver services, and Antwi talked about the presence of Gunnar Stockton at Georgia and how that kind of mattered in his recruitment. Another example of that, Denylon Morissette, who was also kind of quoted by Jeff Sintel, DawgNation.com over the weekend. And I think what Morissette says here is so, I would say, a snapshot of what I think you're going to hear a lot more from guys in the class of 2022 when it comes to receiver play. Can we show the Morissette quote here? Once again, this is Denylon Morissette, a four-star wide receiver in the class of 2022. Jeff had a great story with him at DawgNation.com going back to a Sunday. This is what Morissette says. I already told them if they got Gunner, they definitely have a better step in getting me, he says, because Gunner is an amazing quarterback. I played with him in middle school. We've got a lot of chemistry together. I wouldn't mind playing with him in college. So 2 big sentences there from Denylin Morissette. If you got Gunner Stockton, you have a better chance of getting me. Wouldn't mind playing with a guy like that in college. Let's watch now over the course of the next few days, maybe as soon as, well, sooner than maybe any of us realize. Let's watch to see how these 4-star, highly rated wide receiver types in this class of 2022, let's watch to see how they respond to the presence of Stockton in this class for the Dogs. These quarterbacks historically have had a lot of coattails, a lot of momentum once they make their pledge. Stockton has made his pledge. In the immediate aftermath of that, we've heard a bunch of receivers kind of jump on to say, well, all of a sudden now, Georgia gives me a whole lot more to consider. That could be a fun one to watch there in the days ahead. And as I said, maybe sooner rather than later when it comes to Georgia influencing receivers for the class of 2022 based on the fact that Stockton is now in that class. It's great to have you with us here on DawgNation Daily, presented by Pella Window and Door of Georgia. That was Around the Doghouse. Before we're done, I want to mention something that I should have really mentioned on Friday's show, but we were so busy didn't get a chance to, that some of y'all have had some fun with on social media. We'll talk about that. A lot to kind of get to from, like, say, the Senior Bowl in Mobile over the weekend, how the Georgia players kind of finished up with all of that. We've got a good Gator Hater roll call Golden Shoe winner that we'll award today. So we're going to do a bunch of fun stuff before it's all said and done. But for now, here on DawgNation Daily, presented by Pella Window and Door of Georgia, let's get ready to talk to John Stinchcomb.
From Athens and across the SEC or wherever the recruiting trail may lead, here's a DawgNation.com insider.
And we'll say hello to John Stinchcomb here on DawgNation Daily, presented by Pella Window and Door of Georgia. Always fun to get a chance to do that. John, such a terrific voice talking Georgia football. And, John, one of the things I was discussing before you joined us is, Florida getting Arik Gilbert, the tight end at LSU. This is a player I've liked. As I've said before and we'll say again, this is not necessarily a big need for Georgia, but it is a want because I do think that Gilbert's a pretty special player, at least has the chance to be that. But maybe more importantly, it's the rise of Florida as a destination for these transfers. You think about Brenton Cox leaving Georgia and going to Florida. You think about Arik Gilbert here doing this right now. Justin Shorter, the former 5-star receiver, leaves Penn State. He goes to Florida. He had a couple good moments for the Gators here this year. Bowman, the running back, and at Clemson kind of doing some of that same kind of stuff. It's not the kind of thing that I think is equal to high school football recruiting because you have to put a lot of resources into guys that you may only have for 1 year. That's not a great way to build depth. It's certainly not very efficient, but it is the kind of thing that I do notice about Florida. What do you think about this recent penchant of them bringing in the transfer players as a way of trying to keep pace with a recruiting juggernaut like what Georgia brings to the table?
Well, it's nothing short of problematic because you're talking about guys that at one point or another were really highly touted for their skills, and I think Gilbert is definitely an arrow-up player who's young, and his best days are still in front of him. Same thing with Bauman coming out of Clemson, a running back that was a 5-star, top 30 type guy who's looking for more opportunity, and they seem to be stockpiling some really key assets and players that can help any program. And when you're talking about Florida, that's not a good thing. I think obviously Tennessee is going to be down for a while, and you look at the East and who represented our side of the conference this past year, it was Florida, and we don't want them to stay competitive. And when they keep adding pieces like that, it's hard to think that they won't be.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things in the SEC, and it's one of the things we love about the league is it's just hard to get a true total win, right? Georgia had beaten Florida several years in a row, beat Mullen a couple of those years in 2018 and 2019, and you're kind of on top. But when you let it slip and Florida slips in and gets you in 2020, all of a sudden you do give them a chance to build something that could last for a little while. I think it's one of the things that kind of validates our choice to always have that Georgia-Florida game circled on our calendars here on our program because of the fact that, this rivalry is so intense. And when you give an inch to any of these SEC programs, they have a tendency to try to take a little bit more than that. So I would say it's once again important for Georgia to go out there and get that win on the field against the Gators here this fall to, just kind of send a message about, this not really being a destination that elite players should want to go to.
Yeah, and I think a competitive Florida team on an annual basis, if I was not biased, which of course I am, is a good thing. It's a good thing for the conference. It looks good for Georgia when they beat them on an annual basis, that you have that quality opponent. But Florida's, I hate to say it, but Dan Mullins is a talented coach, and now he's got even more players to use and develop and work with in the program. But I think back to the days where Steve Spurrier was quoted as saying, I'll butcher the quote, so I'll paraphrase, but basically he wanted the rivalry at the time to be similar to what Florida had with Georgia during his era, as compared to the Florida State rivalry, because their record was so lopsided. And during this Kirby Smart era, I want the same thing for us, that Florida is a talented team, but it is very obvious on an annual basis that Georgia is the superior program.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. Georgia did get some good news on the recruiting trail last week, bringing in Gunnar Stockton, 5-star quarterback for the class of 2022. This gets a lot of folks' attention outside the bubble of DawgNation because Georgia already had a 5-star quarterback waiting in the wings in Brock Vandegrift. I think the general thought from a lot of people is you can't have enough quarterback depth, and if these guys enter into this, each knowing about the other, then you sort of have to wish them well and see how the competition plays out. There seems to also be a lot to like about Stockton as well. What did you make of this big addition for Georgia in its 2022 class?
Well, first and foremost, it speaks to the prowess of this staff and their ability to recruit. No program has had the success in bringing in the talent at a singular position than Georgia has under Coach Smart, and it is something that's really noteworthy. Now, retention most certainly has been an issue with Eason and Fields transferring, Dwan Mathis. There's been a lot of exodus, but I think that's kind of the world we live in now, that even the influx of guys like J.T. Daniels, that this is a college football playing field, if you will, where there transfers is part of the game now. And like it or not, and I know which camp I land in, it is what it is, and that's part of it. So to be able to have access to and first crack at talent that everyone is recognized as special and elite with Vandegrift and Gunnar, I think that's a great opportunity and speaks volumes for what Georgia has created and continues to build.
The other thing is, the state of Georgia has become maybe different than it was years ago, kind of a hotbed for quarterbacks. There was a time years ago that you would have said, well, Georgia's a great place for defensive linemen. It's a great place maybe for running backs and all these other positions. But, it's like a Texas, California, Florida who you kind of thought of as the states most likely to produce quarterbacks. There's always been kind of a correlation between population size and, elite quarterback play, things like that. But you watch the state of Georgia, not the University of Georgia, but the state of Georgia over the course of the last half decade or so, close to a decade, all of a sudden now this state is producing really top flight, high quality quarterbacks in a big way. And for Georgia to say, hey, we want to make sure that we're kind of a top of mind school for the top quarterbacks in the state, which now rank among the best in the country, that's an important thing for Georgia to be able to establish for itself as well, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think part of it has to do with the evolution of the game. I think Georgia football, like the state of Georgia, high school football, has been so dominated by just great running backs and just really good, solid interior play, offensive, defensive line. And now, because of the evolution of the game, you see many more on Friday nights. You see many more teams using more open sets and never get under center and everything's at a shotgun. And obviously that lends itself more to the development of quarterbacks, and their skills are more highly refined than what we'd seen in years past just because of the opportunities that they have. So I think that certainly plays a part, but Georgia has always been just a hotbed of talent. I mean, top 3 in my mind of states where on an annual basis they're just going to be filling so many different programs, SEC, Power 5, all the way down, just because of the level of play and competitiveness that has been created in our state.
Something else that's happened since you and I have had a chance to speak, Georgia did hire a defensive backs coach last week, Jamal Aday, which I believe is the 7th different pronunciation I've used for his name since he's been hired by UGA. But whether I can say his name or not yet, I'm sure I'll get better at that as time goes by. But whether I can pronounce his name correctly or not, John, I think there's a lot to like about him. And this is not just kind of the general, I guess, puffery that goes along with, Georgia hiring an assistant coach. We had predicted on this show there's a very good chance that the guy that Georgia hired might not be that famous, but given the track record of recent Kirby defensive hires, there would probably be a few reasons to think this guy be a pretty good coach. You look what he did at West Virginia. Tough situation for that defense a year ago because of a weird scenario with the previous defensive coordinator. Aday and his colleagues got thrown into a tough spot, led the country and passing yards allowed in the Big 12 league that's not particularly famous for passing defense. I just think there's a lot to like about this guy. I've watched a couple of interviews with him on YouTube, press conferences, things that he did. He kind of comes across as a sharp guy, kind of a no-nonsense guy. Defensive secondary is such an important position group for Georgia because of the lack of experience for the upcoming season. Having a guy like this who has a proven track record of getting it done on the field, I think it could prove, John, to be a real asset for UGA. Do you agree with that?
I hope so. I hope you're right, and only time will tell because he's facing quite a daunting challenge just because of the number of bodies that Georgia loses at that position group. We already knew coming into this off season that it's going to be a challenge just to get guys up to speed. I mean, you've lost so many of your key contributors either to the draft or transfer or just the attrition of a position that you knew whoever was coming in as this new position coach was going to have a challenge. So to get a guy that his background is, you just said it, 2 years ago, position group that was struggling and you had to develop and really improve a position group. Well, hopefully it's not the exact same, but the task of getting guys up to speed as quickly as possible is very much the case, and the difference is going to be the level of talent in the room. There's no question that Georgia, even with their limited numbers, has better pieces of clay for a artist to meld and mold than what West Virginia has had in recent years. And I think his ability to come in and work with a talented group, if short on numbers, they still are able-bodied, that it's important to get somebody in who's known for their development of skills and progressing players.
And just to quickly reiterate something I think you and I have talked about before is, listen, they may prove to be, a great recruiter at Georgia, and obviously as a fan I hope that he does, but for now it's about taking the talent that you do have, and it's not an insignificant amount. It's inexperience, which, historically seems to matter for secondary play. It matters in that position group across the country, but Georgia's got the talent. This seems to be the kind of, I'm making some broad assumptions here, but given what happened last year for West Virginia, maybe he's got the technical prowess, the instructional mind that can get the most out of these guys to at least allow the secondary to keep pace with the rest of the defense and not be a glaring issue in a year in which seems like Georgia has so much else going for it. You just want to keep this inexperienced but talented group from being an Achilles heel, a weakness. Aday's going to face a tough job, but he may have the coaching skills necessary to get that done.
And my hope and desire is that it's matched with that underdog, just that dog mentality of we've got to overachieve, we've got to prove them wrong, we've got to maximize everything we've got, which, usually accompanies players with more to prove. And that's not always the case with your five-star guys or your blue-chip player. They have been able to, because they've been touched by the hand of God, they've got that special talent that so many of us have desired at one point or another. But for other folks that may not have those measurables, you have to come in with that mentality of, man, I got to go out there and eat. You stay hungry. Now you put that, you combine those two with guys like Keely Ringo, who's super talented. We just haven't seen them yet. And combine that with that attitude of, I've got something to prove, I need to go out there each time and compete. And that's when you get something special. So I think there's a unique opportunity here to combine some high-level talent with this opportunity to go out and really prove yourself and stay hungry and have that just mad dog mentality, if you will.
Let me ask you something that's kind of off the radar a little bit, but I'm honestly curious of your opinion, and I don't know that there's a good solution to this. I'm just curious to know what you think, because last week, John, when the Georgia schedule came out, the angle that I kind of took on it was, hey, when you look at the way this schedule plays out, I think it kind of shapes up well for Georgia. It doesn't guarantee any kind of success, but when you've got this kind of schedule after Clemson, ahead of Florida, you have a chance to really make some ground here, and it could be an advantageous schedule for Georgia. And when I got back in terms of responses from some fans was, yeah, BA, you're probably right, and that's all well and good, but as a season ticket holder, I'm a little disappointed by the quality of home game coming into Athens this year. And we knew who the opponents were going to be already, but when you see it kind of listed out, you realize that Tennessee is a road game this year, that Auburn is a road game. To the extent that Georgia Tech matters, it's a road game as well. Jacksonville is the site for Florida every single year. The home slate looks like a South Carolina and Arkansas, some group of five type programs, and in one case even an FCS type opponent, that it doesn't really have that marquee home game. Now listen, in years to come, Georgia's got big non-conference home and homes coming up, and in a few years Georgia fans get to enjoy that. But what would you say right now to the Georgia fan who's a little bit disappointed that home slate for 2021 doesn't really have that big time marquee opponent that would get you excited the way that we kind of know what SEC football kind of looks like?
Well, it would make me feel better is at the end of the season when you look at it, and this isn't the most challenging slate of games overall. If I got to go watch my dogs play in a national championship run season, I feel pretty good about it.
Yeah.
As I look back and I tell stories of, I saw that team in person, and man, were they dominant. That sounds pretty good when you're talking about a historic run. And, total speculation here. It's January, and there's a lot of chips that will have to fall between now and then. But this season schedule is not the worst. I mean, it is not. It's an easy schedule, as easy as it probably can be at this time of year. And I understand the frustration for some fans, if that's what we want to call it, frustration. But I also think, man, there's all the major programs have lost their stud quarterbacks, and we've got a guy that I feel really good about and excited to see what he puts together for a full season. And if we can get some other pieces in place, this might be a special year. And you better believe, given the opportunity, I want to go see that in person, no matter who they're playing. And I think that's what this season is starting to really take shape and point towards.
Let me squeeze in one more thing before I let you go. And, of course, you've always been generous with your time. But we just saw the Senior Bowl this past weekend in Mobile, Alabama. It seems like a couple of Georgia guys did pretty well. DJ Daniel earned some praise. Mark Webb seemed to kind of be all over the place. Some other Georgia guys were a little banged up. John, I apologize for not remembering. I don't know if you were a Senior Bowl participant, but what do you think about this step and kind of the pre-draft process for guys who are either assured of an NFL career and just not quite sure where they're going to land in the draft, or guys who are trying to earn the kind of attention that could allow them to play on Sundays? What do you think about this all-star type of season for those guys in that pre-draft process?
BA, you don't remember whether or not I played in the Senior Bowl?
I apologize.
I'm devastated.
I'm sorry. Sorry to hear that.
I did play, and it's a great opportunity. I think you're competing against, you're used to competing against high-level talent. You played in the SEC,
sure.
But you're talking about national talent. And, my heart goes out to guys like Malik Herring, who tore his ACL in that, and that's the inherent risk of this game. Because from my understanding, he was having a heck of a week, and luckily with ACLs now, that's something that most teams and any kind of doctor and staff, medical staff for a program, they feel pretty comfortable with a player's ability to come back from it. So, I wish Malik the best and a speedy recovery. But it's a great opportunity, and guys that still have a little left to prove to kind of distinguish themselves. Maybe it was a different role, or you need to see skills up close, and you have all these scouts and management, and on the same field you can compare two very similar players that are high level and distinguish yourself. That's a unique and special opportunity. Not to mention, in the meeting rooms, you're with an NFL staff that's teaching you a very limited and pared back version of their program, of their plays, but that's invaluable time too, not only for yourself, but for the coaches that are in the room. I know a couple guys on that team that I was on in the Senior Bowl that ended up going and playing for the team for which their position group was coaching. Now, what role did that play? I don't know, but I think it certainly matters when you've got that one-on-one time to just impress and kind of distinguish yourself, because there's a lot of really talented players, and you're just looking at trying to find that little edge that differentiates yourself a little higher than the guy that may either come across the same in the numbers category, or because of limited plays, or whatever that case may be. You're just trying to get that opportunity to distinguish yourself a little better.
Let me squeeze this in just really quick, because, as an offensive lineman, your entire career, you're, kind of contributing to team success, and you're helping other people get the glory. But when you transition to this part of your football life, all of a sudden now you're playing or working out and knowing there's a little bit more of an individual spotlight on you, and there's an evaluation taking place of you. And at times these NFL evaluations can be harsh evaluations. Did you have more butterflies in the stomach, more nerves, knowing that you had a chance to kind of go out there and make yourself some money, more so than just helping a team win a game?
Well, it's unique because it's time. It was the combine and the pro day for measurables, right? If you're looking at 3-cone drill and bench press, and obviously the 40-yard dash and vertical jump, and at the end of the day, for most of these guys, that was just two opportunities. The combine and pro day, and my understanding is there will be no combine, and there's very limited pro day opportunities for these players. So the pressure to impress, given some already limited, but even more reduced exposure to these teams, you certainly feel that pressure. I remember thinking that you look at these numbers and on a bench press, 19 looks a heck of a lot worse than 21.
Right.
That's 2 reps.
Right.
A guy who's in the teens, you think, ooh, he might struggle with power, whereas a guy who hits 21, you think, well, that's not great, but, it seems serviceable. Or a 40-yard dash, and, you're a linebacker, and you're like, 4.8, that guy couldn't cover most tight ends in the league, but you run a 4.6, and you think, well, this guy, I think he's got enough juice to run with the players in our division. Okay, so that having a bad day or being off just a little bit could really matter, and with that comes a lot of anxiety and pressure.
John, great stuff. Thank you so much. I know I've taken a lot of your time today, but it's just so much fun to hear your thoughts on what's going on with the UGA and what's kind of going on with the football world in general. A real treat for us to get a chance to do that. Hope you have a great week, and we'll look forward to talking to you back here again very soon on DawgNation Daily, presented by Pella Window and Door of Georgia.
Always a pleasure. Go Dogs.
Let's take a look around the rest of the league. This is SEC Through.
One of the things I was going to talk to John about, just didn't have time to because we talked about so much of the stuff, is for whatever reason I'm fascinated by Matthew Stafford, now a member of the LA Rams. We talked about this a little bit last week, the chance that he now has after a pretty blockbuster trade. I think it's been, since the 1960s we've seen 2 former number 1 picks traded for each other. Obviously, Jared Goff, who I'd want no part of, goes to the Detroit Lions. Stafford to the Rams. Am I right about this? And I'm very good chance I'm wrong about all of it. So Kentavious Caldwell-Pope won a title with the Lakers. Is that correct? Did Alex Wood, former Georgia baseball pitcher, win a World Series ring with the Los Angeles Dodgers? So there's a little bit of a history of Georgia guys in L.A. doing well. So that means absolutely nothing when it comes to Stafford with the Rams, but at least keep that in mind. Todd Gurley got to a Super Bowl with the Rams, so there's a little bit of a UGA to L.A. Type pipeline that's kind of worked out here well in the past. I was going to talk to John about that, but at a certain point, I've just kept him as long as he probably wants to be on the phone there. So we'll let him kind of roll on and enjoy the rest of his week. But really good stuff, as always, here on DawgNation Daily, presented by Pella Window and Door of Georgia. Let me also kind of share a couple more thoughts on the Senior Bowl. And John's right, as we said before, you hate to see what happens for Malik Herring. We talked about this last week. Such a disappointing thing, sad thing to see that. And you obviously wish him well as he kind of works back through that on a happier note. Seems like DJ Daniel turned some heads this week, so you're kind of excited about that. You'll follow it, see where it goes. There were a couple of other SEC notes that I thought were pretty interesting. It seems like Felipe Franks had a pretty good game over the course of the week. I didn't watch the game. I'm not typically into these type of things, but the basic gist that I heard was sounds like Felipe Franks had a pretty good game there, which I do think ends up being a pretty good commercial for Kendall Briles, who, as we've said before, one of the surprises of the SEC this season was that Arkansas team finding a way to get to 5-5, and the work that both the coordinators did. Barry Odom, the defensive side, who probably got the most attention, and Arkansas had to work to keep over the course of the offseason. But Kendall Briles is a really sharp offensive mind. There were plenty of SEC fans that essentially treated Felipe Franks as a laughingstock. But he was a serviceable quarterback for Arkansas this season. By the way, the one game that Franks didn't play near the end of the year against Missouri, Arkansas was also scoring all in bunches in that game there as well. So Briles has established himself as, I would say, one of the top offensive minds in the SEC. In addition to that, sounds like Kellen Mond had a nice day, the Texas A&M quarterback. Obviously, what happens at quarterback after Mond in College Station is really interesting, as I think that for the most part, people would think of Mond at Texas A&M as solid, not spectacular, maybe at times even having to scuffle just to work his way up to being solid. What happens at quarterback after Mond at College Station, I think it's going to be really interesting. I heard a little bit of a jab, not want to say jab, but a little bit of criticism coming the way of someone like, say, Alex Leatherwood, the Alabama offensive lineman who, according to some of the stuff that I've seen kicked around, may have not indicated a first-round type status for himself there at Alabama. It kind of got me thinking about this a little bit. In college basketball, there's this thought of, like the perfect recruit being someone who's good enough to eventually play in the NBA, but not quite so good that he's a one-and-done level player. Leatherwood was kind of one of those high-profile guys that used to stick around at Alabama last season. if he were to, eventually be a second-round pick, it becomes a little easier to understand why it was that he stuck around, that he wasn't quite a first-round guy. That when you have these first-round guys that leave after their junior season, that can be good. But if you've got a second-round pick who'll stay for all 4 years, in some cases that might be a little bit better. So interesting to watch that with Leatherwood and his status moving forward, but also interesting to kind of think of, okay, well, maybe some of these guys that did choose to come back to school, maybe they had a reason for why they did so. In Leatherwood's case, maybe not quite the first-round draft pick status that some people thought he was going to have. I thought our buddy Mike Griffith had an interesting piece up at DawgNation.com with some quotes from SEC Commissioner Greg Sankey about what the future of the SEC could look like when it comes to attendance. And by the way, by future, I mean near future here in 2021. One of the quotes from Sankey, who was actually interviewed by the St. Louis Post-Dispatch, veteran reporter Dave Matter supplying this, Mike writing it up for DawgNation.com. Sankey says that we rely on our doctors. He says, I think there's some light at the end of the tunnel when it comes to more fans in stadiums this fall. Right now you see a really severe downward trend, generally in numbers, but we're still having people affected. What I would say about this is I've been a little bit, I don't want to say down in the dumps, but I've been a little bit melancholy about the idea that 2021 was going to look the way that I want it to look, kind of back to normal, when you see how weird this college basketball season has been, when you know how many challenges that were faced during the college football season, a season that I think by and large was a really big success, but it was not without some pretty significant challenges on the players especially. They really faced the brunt of all of that, and I was just kind of wondering, is there any chance things can be that much better by the time you roll around to 2021? And, then you start seeing things kind of happen, in life away from football. Like in the last couple days, my grandmother's gotten a appointment to get a vaccine. My mom has. Both of my wife's parents have kind of gotten their appointment to get their vaccines taken care of. And you hear about more and more people doing this. And all of a sudden now I'm a little bit more optimistic than I was that maybe the world can kind of start putting itself back together a little bit here in the months to come. A lot of folks have done a lot of good work to get these vaccines out there, and that's been going on now for a while. And, when you start to see some of that kind of stuff start to take shape and you see the evidence of that, maybe the fall, by the time we get there, maybe it can look a lot different than this past fall was and a lot more like the falls that we've enjoyed in the past. You certainly hope that's the case anyway. And for now, we'll make that your SEC through. And I also want to give a quick shout out to this because I got so many people that brought this up to me. So I did not get what I wanted in terms of Arik Gilbert, the former LSU tight end coming to UGA. I like Gilbert. I think he's a fun player. Love to have had him at Georgia. We talked about that plenty. Ultimately, I did not get what I wanted on that. However, something that I did get that I definitely said that I wanted, we talked about this on one of the shows a few days ago, and lo and behold, then it happens. Topgolf Live is coming to Sanford Stadium. Georgia football putting it on Twitter. An exciting and new opportunity for dog fans to experience Sanford Stadium like nobody ever has before, except for the recruits who we've seen on video doing this over the years. I've definitely seen recruits doing this before. But nonetheless, they say coming soon. Topgolf Live coming to Sanford Stadium. I think this is a creative way to make a little money around the program. I know that Josh Brooks, the new athletic director, has talked about being open to concerts and things like that. But the honest truth is, even in a non-COVID world, there just aren't that many acts who are even big enough to play a stadium anymore. It's just kind of a different landscape musically. So you've got to have more on your mind than just concerts, and this is kind of a cool idea about that. I want to be there for it. I want DawgNation to do something around that. Find a way to be at the UGA bookstore, something like that. I think this is going to be a really fun thing and kind of a creative way to make use of Sanford Stadium during a non-football time of the year. So big shout out to UGA for making a way to make this happen. Fun to be welcoming the folks in Topgolf to Athens later on this summer. That's all really good. And I know a lot of you said, BA, I'm glad to see you got what you wanted on this one. Yeah, I may not get every player that I want, but at least in this case, a fun event that I wanted to see between the hedges. Apparently that is going to take place as Topgolf comes to Sanford Stadium later on this summer. And as we wrap up here, we started the show by saying, Georgia-Florida, the game in October made all the more important because of the fact that when you got these transfers, all of a sudden they think, maybe I'll go check out Florida. That was the hot team a year ago. Maybe they'll be the hot team again this year. it's important to take that bunch, those Gators, down a peg on the field. I got no ill will for Gilbert. He should go wherever he wants to go. I'm not going to complain about him and the choices that he made, but I do want the future versions of these Arik Gilberts, the guys who'd be considering Florida. I want Georgia to give them something else to consider, and in Jacksonville this October chance to do that. With that in mind, how about today's Golden Shoe winner? This is a multi-time winner, our buddy Mad Dog 19, giving you JT Daniels, the Gator over his shoulder. We've seen this image before. He says, date circled, unfinished business, Golden Shoe, Gator Hater. Love that from Mad Dog. How about a Gator Hater countdown? 271 days. We will... Connor hasn't done the Gator Hater countdown yet. 271 days. We will see you tomorrow. DawgNation Daily, presented by Pella Window and Door of Georgia. Yeah, so on video, let me just say this. Our producers kind of toggle back and forth a little bit. Last week, our buddy Michael Carvel was here. So Connor was not here for the return of the Gator Hater countdown, but it is back and better than ever. To the tune of 271 days. How about a Gator Hater countdown right there? That is looking really good. Cannot wait for Jacksonville coming up for all the fun there. All right, with that said, let's dive in here. I'll take some of your comments on both Facebook and YouTube, and I'll give a huge shout out to my friends at R.S. Andrews for making it all possible. R.S. Andrews, they'll take care of when it comes to your air conditioning, your heating, your plumbing, electric needs. You can trust them for all that. Find them online at rsandrews.com. If your water heater goes out, in many cases, they can replace it for you the same day. The big game's coming up this weekend. That means for many of you, a big party, big hangout, a lot of friends getting together. The last thing you want is to have that ruined by some sort of plumbing issue or something like that. So keep R.S. Andrews in mind, rsandrews.com, if you find yourself in the midst of, some sort of system emergency there in your house. All right, let me dive over here. We'll take a few of your comments. I'll do Facebook first. I'll do YouTube. We do have to get off the air pretty quick after that just because we got a lot going on here today. So, I don't know why I always say that, but really and truly, we've got to try to keep the train on the tracks here today. So you can talk about Gilbert, you can talk about whatever else, and we will just have some fun here on a Monday. All right, in the Facebook comment section, I guess the badges are still an issue, I'm being told. Brian Whitehead says, any surprises for signing day on Wednesday? I don't really think so, right? I mean, I guess, for a while, I kind of had my eye out there to see if Georgia might be, looking to bring somebody else in. But at this point in time, I'm guessing it's just Arnold. Or I mean, not saying that I know for a fact Arnold's coming, but I'm guessing that's the big thing. I don't think there's much else out there. Kevin Mills says when it comes to Rick Gilbert's decision to go to Florida, he says, who's going to be throwing the ball for the Gators? And that's not a rhetorical question. A lot of folks think it might be Emory Jones. I have certainly heard the possibility that someone like Anthony Richardson could kind of emerge there one way or another. If you are Gilbert, the one hope is, I hope that he's not just simply choosing the hot team from a year ago, because goodness knows we've all been talking about stock market a lot lately. If you make your business investment choices on what the hot stock was a year ago, that's a good way to go broke really, really fast. You can't use last year's winner to determine who this year's, best choice is going to be. I would say, at least it looks like Gilbert may have been guilty of that one time before when it comes to choosing LSU the year after they'd done big things offensively. And it's easy to say, well, if I'm a tight end, I see what Florida's done with Kyle Pitts. That's the place that I want to be. That was also last year. Things have a way of changing. And I just hope for Gilbert's sake that he knows kind of what he's getting into on that. But that quarterback competition at Florida, whether it's the emergence of Jones, who probably is the inside track, or someone else like Richardson, that's going to be watched really closely. Brad Fawcett says, any news on Muschamp? So the last thing we had was in the show last week, photograph that Chip Tower shared on social media from our buddy Jamie Kennedy of Muschamp seemingly getting some internet, things like that, installed in his new home in the Athens area. So Muschamp is living here. His son is a walk-on. Muschamp and Kirby are friends, so we definitely know or can expect Muschamp to be spending a lot of time around the Georgia program. It simply comes down to a matter of, will he be earning a paycheck for doing so, and will Georgia ever announce it if he does? And that's the thing, is that when it comes to a lot of these, analyst-type things like that, Georgia's not really under a whole lot of pressure to make public announcements about that. There are a lot of guys who kind of come and go as analysts. We don't ever really get any kind of public proclamation about that. At some point, Smart may be asked about Muschamp again because he is a former head coach, but Muschamp's got so much money. I'm just obviously speculating at this point in time, but he's got so much money, having been an SEC coach for as many years as he has been, that he could almost fulfill the role of an analyst without getting paid at all at Georgia, just as a way of kind of keeping it off the books or something like that. Randy Hall says Georgia needs Terry and Arnold even more now, and I would say that's probably true. Chad Williams asked about Georgia having 2 defensive backs coaches. Yeah, I mean, if Muschamp's kind of working around the program, he certainly has some expertise there in that regard. Jan Armistead checking in from Gainesville, Georgia. Great place to live on Lake Lanier. A lot of dog fans there. Yeah, Gainesville's my hometown. I've always been a big fan of that part of the world for sure. Let me go over to YouTube here for a moment. I mean, I think then, if Muschamp is around, to me, the biggest and best value that it brings to the table is not another pair of hands working with defensive backs, although that could, be something. But it's really more about the, someone who spent his entire life watching film and watching film closely. Imagine him and the tendencies that he could spot with a team like Clemson, who you play in week 1, who Muschamp does know really well. Even if he hasn't won those games head-to-head, he's watched as much Clemson film, I'm guessing, as anybody that Georgia could have and bring them in there. And, that's the thing that analysts, I think, are able to do for you. It's like, Georgia, Alabama, teams like that, programs like that, have so much money they can afford to be somewhat inefficient with their time, right? It's like, telling an analyst to spend, hours and hours and hours and hours watching this, particular team's game film that may only result in a small schematic edge is not a very good use of time. But when you've got money to burn, paying someone to spend their time that way for even the littlest bit of edge, those little edges over the course of time add up to something pretty significant. Taiwan Taylor on the subject of Jamie Newman. Yeah, it certainly seems like whatever happened with Newman doesn't seem like it's working out all that well with, what he was able to or not able to show at the Senior Bowl. And I've said before, I don't want Newman connected to the Georgia program. I don't like when these graphics show him as a former Georgia quarterback because I think words matter, and that's obviously a poor description of what Jamie Newman was. But in terms of having like personal animosity against him, I don't really have that. Guys want to make money playing football. I wish them well as they try to. Hard to imagine the last 12 months have worked out the way that Newman would want them to. Jeremy Harbin says that Georgia will be a balanced offense next year and may even be more passes than runs, I believe. Yeah, Jeremy, that's one of those things I think we're going to talk a lot about, kind of the months to come. And for me, it really comes down to this. This is what matters more than anything else. Like you talk about the balance and the end of game, end of season ratio between run and pass is crucial, but it's also when those runs come, when those passes come. What happens on 2nd 5, for instance, for Georgia? Is that a passing down primarily, or is that a running down primarily? It's those little moments like that where early in the game, early in drives, on early downs, Georgia has a chance to establish its true passing dominance. Like you watch a guy like Andy Reid. Andy Reid's never running it on 2nd 5 probably, but on 3rd and 9 he might run. It's one of those things where these smart offensive minds like to kind of keep you off balance and kind of what you're expecting there. In the college game, it kind of works out the same way, that the smart teams are throwing a lot on 1st and 2nd down. They're throwing a lot in the 1st and 2nd quarter. And if they establish a lead, look at Alabama. 4th quarters last year, a lot of running plays. In some of the games they played, it's this systematic running play after running play after running play once they had built up that big lead. So the ratio of run-pass tells us a lot, but it's when the running plays get called, what's the story in the game at the time, passing plays much the same way. It's when these plays get called that ultimately I think is going to really be a very telling stat. Scott Harris says the Arik decision shows how fast LSU has fallen. Next year is big for Coach O. The seat is warming. I would say that this is an important year for LSU coming up. I also expect it to be a little bit of a bounce-back year for LSU. I'm not really quite ready to give up on Ed Orgeron yet. But one of the things I'd love to hear, a little more opinion from people who are plugged in on is, I thought the way that which LSU handled the Gilbert situation, I'm going to stay consistent on this even after Gilbert has chosen Florida. I thought the way in which that Gilbert situation got handled publicly was really pretty distasteful. It was really Orgeron who put it out there that he wanted to opt out because he wanted to rest his body. As it turns out, that probably wasn't true. That what Gilbert wanted to do was leave LSU. He put a process in motion that concluded with him transferring to Florida, or at least he says he's announced that he's transferring to Florida. I don't guess he's officially transferred as of yet. But, is really Orgeron who spun this as, well, he wants to opt out, and the reason why he wants to opt out is because he wants to rest his body. If that's what Gilbert was thinking or saying, we never really got anything publicly from Gilbert on that. But once Orgeron said it that way, all of a sudden it opened the door for former players, local radio guys in Baton Rouge, former LSU players on social media. They really went hard after Gilbert and really, really kind of trashed him a little bit. And all of that, I thought, was kind of, Gilbert had that sicked on him by Orgeron's own public statements. I wonder what kind of recruiting reverberations there might be for that. As I said before, it's one thing for me to say that when I thought that Gilbert was coming to Georgia, but now that he's at Florida, I'm still not changing my tune on that. I didn't think LSU handled the situation involving Gilbert very well. Noah Sheldon says I should get another golden shoe. That'd be interesting. A pair of golden shoes. I guess the reason why we have the one is because he only threw the one shoe. So I guess that's kind of where that comes from. Although I could get a pair of golden shoes and be like Michael Johnson in the 1996 Olympics. Captain G says the Arik decision is based on touches. He says, I think. UGA is far more loaded at the skill position, and it's doubtful he would have got as many targets at UGA. Yeah, I think the thing we all need to kind of embrace here just a bit is that no matter how much we think things might be changing for Georgia offensively, this is about to be a high-powered offense, this is about to be, this or that. Gilbert's already said before that, when Todd Hartley was laying the heavy recruiting pitch on him in 2020 about how different things are going to be and how much, how much we're going to build an offense around you. And some of the things that Gilbert said to our Jeff Sintel, things like that, just kind of led you to believe that he just wasn't quite so sure that was true, that he hadn't seen it with his own eyes, and so therefore he wasn't convinced it was necessarily going to happen. And I think some of the same kind of stuff might be, a little bit true with, what's happening right now. It seems to us that Georgia got Darnell Washington more involved this year. The passing attack would appear to be on the way to getting better. And there just seems to be, kind of a lot to like about the Georgia offense. But that's for those of us who are really plugged in and who've seen everything that's gone on. We feel like we've got some mounting evidence to suggest that. But for someone like Gilbert, who was busy playing on his own team this fall, that brand, that reputation just isn't quite as built out yet. It's one of the reasons why it's really important for Georgia to be good offensively on the field here this year. Green Soldier says, in addition to Orgeron, Mullen also trashed some of his players as well, going back to the Cotton Bowl press conference. That's actually a pretty good point by Green Soldier. We've said before, I did not think that Cotton Bowl press conference for Mullen was very good either. Scott Harris says we're fine with Darnell Washington. I agree, but would have loved to have kept Arik Gilbert away from Florida too, and I agree with really on both fronts there. Memphis Dog says a shoe throwing competition for DawgNation reporters would be really fun. Yeah, if you're throwing a shoe and really want to get it to go as far as it goes, are you doing it like not shot put? What do you call that? Hammer throw style? Are you doing it football style? Dr. Pepper challenge chest pass style. Like if you want the shoe to go as far as it can go, I guess you probably do like the hammer throw, not the shot put thing, but like the thing where you swing it around. Or I guess you can just kind of toss it like a football too. DogFan3 talking about A.J. Johnson, the 4-star wide receiver. Yeah, I've heard some chatter about that. Johnson's also a high school teammate of Arch Manning's too, I believe, which could make that kind of interesting. But yeah, that's definitely out there. Jacob O'Neill says some folks getting some badges back. Yeah, the badge thing is always kind of weird. I never quite know what's going on with that. Let me get one or two more comments. We'll get ready to get out of here. Sheldon Tucker says, how do you block people? There's a certain irony to that, I'm guessing. But we love Sheldon. Love Sheldon. James Tyler Pear says you got to throw it Frisbee style. I could see that being good, like a little flick of the wrist. Mark Godfrey on the subject of the balance bonsai. I wonder what that means. All right, anything else before we go? Chad Williams says, I don't need no stinking badges. Yeah, the badge thing's weird. We're having our issues with big tech lately on a lot of things, and the finicky badges is just an example of that. Clay Dykes on the subject of sticking with one quarterback for the season and establishing some stability. Yeah, I mean that's what Georgia has a chance to do this year, and it's certainly big for Georgia to have their chance to do that. Phil Rogers hoping to see James Cook in the slot. That's really fun. He's a good athlete, man. He's a very good athlete. Keith Old says he was the first Golden Shoe winner. That's really cool. I didn't realize that. That's really cool. Daniel Aldrich says not getting notifications on Facebook, just YouTube. Yeah, Daniel, that's the biggest thing is they have just, I'll just be completely frank with you, they have just greatly reduced the number of notifications they're sending out, just greatly reduced them. And, you read about this kind of stuff all the time, big changes here, big changes there. It's one of the things that, we're having to, kind of work through here which is reminding people that we're always here. I mean, in the entire time I've done the show, I hardly ever take any days off. I obviously had, some stuff going on back in December, but for the most part, we're never not here. So we're going to have to really train, all of you who enjoy being a part of this to know that if you don't get that notification, you probably won't. We have, people who watch every day that just don't get notifications anymore. If you don't get that notification, don't let that be an assumption that we're not here for those of you that enjoy the Facebook platform, because their notification stuff has just gotten very, very weird. Very weird. So we're going to work to do some, things around that. In fact, I'm going to talk to Connor about a couple of things related to that here today. But the big thing is just getting the word out that hey, Zuckerberg may be trying to put the chokehold on us, but we're still here. We're still there. Abbott Robbins, thanks for the kind words. Joel Moody says, more receptions this year, Washington or Gilbert? That's a very interesting question. I mean, I think the one thing that Florida showed you last year was they are willing to make that tight end from time to time their primary, at least among the primary receivers in a route tree, or not a route tree, but a passing play, a route. So is Georgia willing to do the same thing from a tight end standpoint? Be pretty interesting. Randy Hall, excited about Brock Bowers. Yeah, that's a good-looking athlete for sure. All right, I guess we're going to get ready to go here. Really good stuff. Thank you so much. Appreciate you being here as part of our R.S. Andrews Cool Down. Y'all make sure you check out R.S. Andrews online, rsandrews.com. When it comes to your air conditioning, which is, let's face it, spring is around the corner. You got to start thinking about that air conditioning unit. Air conditioning, heating, plumbing, electric. You can trust R.S. Andrews to do all of that for you. You can find them online at rsandrews.com. They'll show up on time. They'll do the work that's promised for the price that's promised. Also, let me remind you to check out the AJC online, ajc.com. That's a great place to get your Atlanta news now. Legislative session going on right now. Chance to follow everything happening inside the city of Atlanta, under the Gold Dome, everything else. Also, and this is not good news, but you've heard about the variant virus, the slightly different strain of the coronavirus. I think maybe started South America. Am I saying that right? Wherever it started, it's kind of worked its way to the United States of America. It's in Georgia, a couple of places where it's been found. You can read more about that online at ajc.com. Also, some more front office maneuverings for the Atlanta Falcons. Longtime salary cap guy Nick Polk, he's out there. You can read more about that from our buddy D-Lad. ajc.com for your Atlanta news now. Y'all, thank you so much for being here for DawgNation Daily, presented by Pella Window and Door of Georgia. Hope you have a great day. See you back here tomorrow at 10 a.m. For more DawgNation videos, check out youtube.com/DawgNation.